Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church. Dave Gadini here from Fellowship of Faith in McHenry, Illinois, in studio with Andrew Metcalf and Steve Wells. And we got Kent Jones over here producing today. And this is the podcast where we invite you to text your questions in just about church, about God, about the Bible, about theology and Christian perspectives on things. We don't care if you're a Christian or not. We don't really care what you believe or not. I mean, we do at some capacity, but we love you regardless. And this is the podcast where you can ask whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're dealing with, whatever you're thinking about. And it's pretty simple. 815-314-0363 is the way you text that question in. I'll give you that again, 815-314-0363. This is actually my first time back in the studio, I feel like, for ages. It's been a while. Last week we had Randy Birchfield back on the show, and we had the crew here talking about the ad and the Super Bowl. What you guys think?
I mean, I think we had good discussion about it. We didn't really settle on anything, but talked about the different aspects and viewpoints that people have. And I haven't really heard anything about it since then. It seemed like it was kind of a few day thing, and then it went away.
I think he gets us.
Yeah, I think.
I haven't seen the billboards though. And I saw the billboards long before I saw the Super Bowl ad. So I mean, it is a bigger campaign than just.
Yeah, it's been going for I think probably like 8 or 9 months.
Yeah,
they started
Yeah, it's not just a Super Bowl campaign.
Yeah, it's a larger campaign. But guys, thanks for kind of just rolling with the show. I mean, I've been out with back injuries. My oldest daughter has recently been diagnosed with cancer, so that's kind of been getting into the mix of things as well. A lot going on in our household on that kind of stuff. But
so you're bored.
But yeah, right. Just like nothing to do.
take a week out.
But like last week, so like I blew my back out last week, like on top of everything, and like for 4 days it was just excruciating pain.
How'd you do it?
I don't know. I mean, in this. There's things that you can like look at. So like the Friday before, like Monday was bad. Friday leading up to it, I went and I started lifting weights again for the first time, maybe in like 4 or 6 weeks. Now that's not unusual for me to get back in, and I warmed up and was doing light weights and I was doing, front squats, and I kind of felt myself tweak it, but I feel myself tweak it like every time, I lift, and just said, leave it alone, finish the rest of the workout, went home, was fine. Saturday morning, I was a little sore, did some yoga. Didn't quite get through every kind of pretzel pose, but I never get through every kind of pretzel pose. It was fine. Sunday, you guys saw me at church a week ago. I was fine. Sunday afternoon, I went out. I was like trimming tree branches and clipping stuff in the yard and doing stuff like that. I was fine. Monday, I go for a walk. I get like a half mile in and I get doubled over. So it's probably cumulative, building up, but literally like, right. Had to stop, like sit down on the way back, was like hunched over, had to like dig my fist into my bag to kind of make it back to the car. And then we're going down to Northwestern in Chicago for my daughter's like consult with a specialist. And I'm sitting here like heaving for breath, but it's like, there's no way I'm missing this appointment. Yeah. So, I mean, the good news is I didn't have to drive in Chicago. Right. So I'm like laid out in the back of the van, just kind of like in this fetal position.
You're a big guy to lay down.
Right.
I know, it's kind of stupid.
In a van? Whose van?
Well, I call it a van. We got a Chevy Traverse.
Oh,
okay. So you put down the seats. You got kind of like the whole cargo.
I'm thinking you rented a van for this.
No.
Had to roll the wheelchair into it.
Right.
But we're there, and of course, you're downtown. There's a lot of walking, just from even like parking lots to doctor's appointments, and it's like grabbing every bench, grabbing every chair.
It's not a small hospital.
And no, it's not. It's not. And
and they're wanting to talk to you and not your daughter.
Yeah.
Oh man, let's help this guy out.
Well, and honestly too, it's like, oh Lord, just get me through this. And thanks be to God. I mean, I was able to kind of get through it coherently. But we're there, and Tina's just like, this is ridiculous. You're going to the ER, and it's like literally right there. And of course, I don't know. I'm not an ER kind of guy. Does that make sense? Right. And I don't know. She fought me on it, and they wheeled me down, and they went off and got something to eat, and I did the ER, and they sent me home with some muscle relaxants and painkillers that didn't do jack. 4 days later, you start coming out of the fog, and it's still kind of hanging on there. But
so is your mind a little clearer now?
It is, but it's like you go from just like that like 5 seconds, just like 5 seconds trying to get through it, to then sheer boredom because you can't do anything, but you can't move.
Is this what labor feels like for women? Is that
maybe I'm having back labor.
Show?
Is this back labor? The show? Yeah.
It's so painful.
Every single week.
Done in an hour.
When is it over?
Not tragic.
It's painful.
Right. So I've got to ask. I'm probably not the only one to ask. So are you one of these guys, or is your family one of these families like, All right, Lord, what did I do to deserve all this?
No, I mean, I talked to a lot of people like
Yeah,
that, but no,
yeah.
that's just never been in my like field of vision or a
Right.
wheelhouse. I do not think God is. Who knows? Maybe I should be more sensitive to it.
See, I
Going,
was
Lord,
gonna say,
Lord, maybe try to tell me something
He's
here, but
teaching you.
yeah, he's not. I am,
Right.
but not about me. I was thinking, what did he do to do this? Right?
Oh, yeah. He irritated somebody. Right? Yeah.
well, send in your suggestions to 815-314-0363, right? And
That's it.
yeah, I'm sure the list is long and illustrious. But guys, yeah, truly, thanks for it's just kind of keeping things moving forward. This has never been about me or just my thing, but I know I do kind of anchor this in some ways, and it's great to be able to step out of studio and
Had a lot of good input about last week's show
Yeah.
too, because it was a little bit different and some
Yeah, you bet.
different points of view. So
Right.
yeah.
right.
It was a
Good
good
feedback.
show. Good feedback.
Yeah.
As far as like everybody having very equal talking time, I did notice I dominated a little bit.
Did you? Yeah, you took that bull by the horns there.
Well, I don't know.
Well, you had a chance.
I did.
Yeah.
My eyes
Ouch.
weren't glazed over for the first time.
Yeah,
Jeez.
Feel the love in this room.
right.
Welcome back.
That's right. By the way, be
So
careful on the
glad
ice when you
you're
leave.
back.
This is the best nap I get all week.
Well, you know what? Today, rumor has it we get to hear Andrew use the word orgasm multiple times on air for some of the questions coming in.
do.
We'll leave you in suspense on when that comes around, I guess. And
I know. Let's let people forget about it, and then we'll come back to
all right.
it. I like this one to start off. It just says, "Hold up, the Sabbath is on Saturday. I always thought it was Sunday."
Mm.
So those are kind of questions, also just statements.
More or
but
less
yeah.
statements. Yeah.
What are your
what?
your reactions to that? I guess.
Yeah. You know, the Sabbath is actually Saturday. Seventh day is Saturday. The reason why Christians gather on Sunday instead of on the Sabbath day is twofold. One, we are no longer under the Old Testament law because of Jesus. So we are no longer under the prescription to have to honor the Sabbath day from a 10 Commandment perspective and keep it holy. But the principles of the Sabbath are still well worth observing and keeping. We might not be under the letter of the law, but there's a spirit of the law here that's going to transcend all space and time. And because Jesus rose on the first day of the week, and because his resurrection marks not just the resurrection of a man, but also the start of a new age and a new way of life and being in God's parameters, so to speak, they moved worship to correspond with that new age, to kind of commemorate that, to remember that, to anchor ourselves in that new life, that new resurrection. And again, new life here isn't just talking about like after you die. New life is what God is breaking into the universe and into the world and into people's lives today that should transform everything. Mm-hmm. So it's living in that new way of life marked by that first day resurrection. Yeah. Every Sunday is Easter from an early Christian perspective.
What have you figured out? Because you've been a pastor for 20-ish years. 20,
It's really
something
easy
like that?
math for me. I was ordained in 2000.
Oh,
like, you know, once a century, this comes along for like a crew, right? So
yeah. So I know, you know, if
23.
So 23.
if you can't do the math.
just to connect the dots for everyone, right?
When you're listening to this 50 years
Right.
from now, it's
Yeah.
way back in
Right.
2023.
Yeah.
How do you go about kind of having a Sabbath for yourself if generally people observe it on Sundays in Christian circles now, but as a pastor, you're working on Sundays. So how have you kind of navigated that over the years? Has it changed? Do you, don't you?
Man, I am terrible at it. It's like a good intention for me that often gets kind of shelved in the busyness of life and the to-do list, because you know what Sabbath becomes more for me is about intentionally stepping away from the demands of life and slavery to the to-do lists and the job and things like that. And even if you're not like working at your career, so to speak, you know, we're just as enslaved to 1,000 other things that are demanded on us in life, right? So I mean, I try to guard one day where I just like don't schedule anything, where I'm free to kind of do what I want. And I'm blessed to kind of like love my job. Mm-hmm. So like, if there's something I want to do, I'm not going to tell myself no on that, but it's kind of a slippery slope too. I got to kind of guard it. And it's often better in principle than in reality for me, but that's at least my intended effort. How about you?
I would say pretty much the same. Yeah. It's like I try to do that on Mondays, but like this past Monday, I spent 3 hours editing audio stuff. So it was like okay, but I enjoy doing that as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes it seems like it's more work to not do work than it is to just do it.
I hear
and
you.
Get it out
I
of the
hear
way.
you.
Like to be like actively trying to avoid checking my email or getting on my computer or anything. Like that almost seems like more work. Then it's like, why don't I just do it, get it out of the way,
Yeah.
and move on?
Right. As long as that doesn't kind of turn into always another thing, always another thing,
Yeah,
always another
exactly.
thing. And if you could pace it, yeah.
But isn't the Sabbath Saturday?
The Sabbath is Saturday.
Right. So if you're not working on Saturday, then Sunday is not.
Well, Sunday's not the Sabbath.
Sabbath.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
Right.
So
Right.
you're kind of working on that, right? So it's the first day. So yeah, I mean, so that's again where a lot of people, oh, hey, you're working on this. Well, no, not necessarily.
Technically,
Yeah.
it's Saturday.
And even
Right.
the Old Testament will talk about how the priests were demanded to work on the Sabbath,
Correct.
and that was kind of part of their
Yeah.
routine and how God gave provision for
Yeah.
that. But yeah, maybe I should say this too. I mean, I don't think you're beholden to any day. I mean, Romans 14 will talk about this, where one person considers one day sacred, another person considers all days alike. Let each do what's right in his kind of
Right.
own eyes before the Lord is more or less my paraphrase of it.
Mhm.
As long as you're honoring God by the intent of what he wants for you in life.
Yeah.
God is a God who frees us from slavery. And it's amazing that we still kind of consign ourselves to slavery, even if we're not owned truly by another human being.
So I'm a guy of routine,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I get up the same time every day. I go through the same routines every day. So like this week,
Yeah.
we were talking about in the green room, banks were closed on Monday because of President's Day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lost. I'm thinking today's Tuesday.
Yeah, right.
Andrew
right.
comes walking in. I'm like, oh crap! Hey, you guys got a show today, and so when it comes to the Sabbath or my day off or whatever, I still kind of have routines that I go through, and I think that helps me get into a space, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that my day off, I'm still going through my routine, and this is what it is. So it's weird, I guess, for me because I'm such a routine guy.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah, and what does it
Didn't
look
know.
like to not work, but also not just do nothing? Like, you can't just not do anything. And
Right.
like, oh well,
Yeah.
this is the Sabbath. I'm gonna lay
My
on
wife
the couch for
would my wife
10
would argue the
hours.
point that I can do nothing.
As much as I would love to do that, I'm not
Right.
great at it.
But I think there's this weird idea that's crept in over the years that what work means is doing something.
Mhm.
And so that the definition of honoring the Sabbath then means doing nothing. And I think it's better to kind of view it as being able to enjoy the real gifts that God has given you. And the real gifts that God has given you are the people in your life, the creation he's put around you, the things, the passions and interests he's put in your heart, the things that you enjoy, right? And a lot of times those can require more physical effort than anything else. But are you just taking that time to go, I don't have to produce. I can trust that God will take care of me. I don't have to be in servitude. I can live free, even if my choice and freedom is to pour myself into something I love to do or that taxes me,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes
great
sense.
question.
So I've been doing the Sabbath all wrong. I've
Have you?
just come to, because what I do is I just sit there, like, and do nothing in a chair in front of a mirror and try and convince myself that I'm made in His image.
It's very noble of you.
How's that going?
Of course, I'm kidding. Anyway, moving on.
For those who don't understand sarcasm, right? On the
You're reflecting on the personhood of God that
Right.
you're seeing in
Wow,
that mirror.
Really? This is what
This
Jesus
is
looks
it.
like, or God looks like? Sad.
I thought he'd have a beard.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can look past the long flowing hair.
Right,
But the
right.
beard, it's kind of a necessity.
long
That's
flowing.
actually in scripture that he had a beard, right?
Well, I
'Cause
suppose.
Before
And
the
shaved head.
crucifixion, they're like ripping out his beard.
No, man.
No, is that not in there anywhere?
No,
Somewhere where they're flogging him, doesn't it say that they ripped out part of his beard?
no.
One by
Clearly,
one.
That's a good image.
I have watched the Passion movie too much.
many times. Or, yeah.
Really?
Or
It
some
wasn't in
movie.
there?
I don't think
That's
it's in
what
the
I do
Passion
every
movie
Sabbath.
either.
Every Sabbath.
Every Sabbath, yeah.
I just watched the Passion.
With, I guess that was the director's cut that you saw. The beard
My own-
ripping
I made
scene.
my own version.
So today is a Christian holiday. called Ash Wednesday. Starts a season called Lent. And there is kind of all this like practice or descriptive kind of things you will see in the Old Testament about people like pulling out their hair and like in grief and sorrow and repentance and stuff like that, or you know, kind of like pulling on the beard and things like that. That might be what you're thinking of here.
It could be
A little bit.
Maybe
Yeah.
it wasn't Jesus at all.
Yeah.
I'm just so much in the Ash Wednesday mindset that
It just consumes you, right?
it really does.
It does, yeah.
Did the Catholics, did they produce this Ash Wednesday?
You know, I don't actually know how far back the tradition goes. I mean, look, it's always tricky to answer that because if you're talking from a Catholic perspective, they'll say, well, we go back to the apostles, like, you know, like we go back to Peter. So of course, anything would be Catholic from a Catholic perspective. But it kind of comes down to how do you define Roman Catholicism today? When do you start the date? You know, I guess we have right before us, like Google,
Right.
and you know, when the start of Ash Wednesday began or Lent began, we can find out pretty quickly right here. In fact, why don't we just for fun?
Just do it.
Yeah,
On pins and needles.
I know it's right.
This is gonna be good.
So here's what it gives me. When did Lent begin? Wednesday, February 22nd.
Today's the first day of Lent.
So
Ever.
We are ahead of the game then because we've been planning for this.
all right. So what Google is telling us, like, and you know, and Google is near omniscient, right? What Google is telling us is it probably started like shortly after the Council of Nicaea, which is about 325 AD. That's at least when it got formalized, probably. Probably in practice before that. What I know about church history is I tend to buy it because actually a lot of these, like, not every little day, but like these major seasons that Christians kind of practice, they do kind of go way, way back. So maybe we could roll with that.
Right. There you go.
You know, it's kind of cool and I think kind of overlooked. I don't know. I never liked Lent growing up. I don't know anyone that likes Lent. People who are depressed, like the Eeyores of this world, they like Lent. But did you ever like Lent growing up? It's like, man, I look forward to this.
No.
I don't know that I really even paid attention to it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, fair enough.
I think if I understood it, because I do kind of like the melancholy, you know, well, it's one of my favorite albums, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness by the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Great album.
Yeah, good Lent album.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's perfect.
Yeah.
Because
It really
you know, you're
is,
horrible.
yeah.
You're a horrible person and a sinner. So go to church.
That's right.
With all the
Yeah.
conviction in the world.
Yeah. Sit there and suffer.
Yeah. But you know, it's some of these moves, like these things that just become tradition, I think sadly too often like tradition for tradition's sake, or people kind of going through the motions on things without realizing it. Like the original intent was like, if I'm like basing my whole life in Jesus and rooting my whole life in Jesus, how do I kind of like rethink how I count time? You know, we all have calendars, but how do I kind of like structure my life around a certain pattern to kind of mirror Jesus' life and, you know, his experiences as best as we can? And it was just kind of the idea that, you know, Jesus faced like a wilderness temptation. He went out in the wilderness for 40 days, was tested by the devil. It was a time of reflection, a time of honing, a time of, you know, all that kind of goes along with that.
Which was not an easy thing to do because
No.
I don't know if you heard about this, but there was recently, just like within the last month, a pastor in Mozambique, I think, who tried this and
Yeah.
died.
Did he
I
seriously?
mean, not to like make fun of, you know,
No,
that
but
he's
he-
dead,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
like it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
So like I don't recommend like just going to try and this was Jesus, okay?
Yeah. Don't give up eating for
You're
40
not
days.
Jesus,
Right.
so-
Right.
Anyway.
But yeah, the idea going, if he went through this, how do I identify with him and go through that as a follower of his,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, if you can root it that way, it's kind of a cool practice.
Okay. I looked up the beard thing.
All
I'm
right,
convinced of
because
it.
yeah, you're right. You're convinced,
So
right?
Isaiah 50, verse 6. I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting.
All right. So my question to you, Andrew,
I don't know if that's
is:
about Jesus.
do
or
you
not,
see that as a messianic prophecy, literally fulfilled in every way, or do you
I
think
don't
that's
know.
referring to the nation of Israel? Where do you fall on the
And
Isaiah
see, I
debate
thought
here?
maybe he was going to say that he's going to pluck out his beard for Lent. this year.
Oh,
I
oh,
I mean, how'd you miss that?
haven't seen my face without a beard in probably 10 years.
So we got this like Ash Wednesday service going on tonight, and
Nice.
we've got like this, in our denomination, it's called a vicar, but this new like assistant, intern pastor who's starting. His name's Todd, great guy, and he's planning to do this thing with like nails, I think tonight. But like, what if Andrew just stands there and we get tweezers,
Yeah.
and everyone gets to,
Tweezers.
everyone gets to kind of like simulate Isaiah 50.
That hurts.
And,
just thinking
See,
I
I,
don't know,
think
man.
that would take
do you
approximately
think?
about 32 minutes to do. And we've got 5 songs at approximately about 32 minutes.
So we're
We'll skip music and we'll just start plucking.
play a little somber.
Instead of
man.
plucking the guitar
My
strings,
whales
we're gonna-
can be the music.
Oh!
He would be the whaler for
it
sure.
will be a night of profanity at FOF.
You can't cuss.
No, we've talked about that on the show
I
before.
know.
That's right.
It's okay sometimes. So we have a couple other Leviticus questions here. I think to do with sacrifices here, they start out, I'm reading Leviticus, and then in parentheses, pray for me. Was it just a bloody mess in the tabernacle? It seems like a lot of blood being thrown around.
Yeah, it really was.
That's the
Is
whole-
that the end of the
that's the whole
question?
comment.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, you want to scar your children, bring them to like, Old Testament tabernacle or temple worship. They would have a big altar. You could read about this in like the back half of the book of Exodus, and in other places of the Bible that describe how it was to be laid out. But there was basically a big altar in front of the tabernacle, and the primary way that you worshipped was you brought a sacrifice, and a lot of those sacrifices were animals. And the primary duty of a priest was to slaughter that animal. So a priest was basically a butcher, in the ancient world. And sometimes they would just, there's ritualistic things they would do with the blood, of course. But even if they weren't using all the blood for a ritualistic purpose, I mean, how much blood is like in a cow, right? Let alone a goat or something like that. And if you're doing sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice, I mean, this is a slaughterhouse going on. And you could just imagine the wails and the screams and the bleeding of the animals and the smells and everything else on top of it. And, it's such a boring book for so many people to read. But if you can kind of get into the headspace of it, the whole thing was meant to be this like visceral image of what sin actually does and what sin demands, and the horror of it was meant to communicate profound truths about the reality of our standing before God and what we deserve, and the price that God pays to take our sins on his behalf. And like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife grew up in a like smaller town in rural Indiana, and I think it was like a 6th or 7th grade field trip. They took them to a sausage factory. Like they took them to the slaughterhouse, like thinking that would be a good idea for a bunch of like, I guess, 12 and 13-year-old girls to see. And you ever been to one?
I have. I used to. Well, I've had pretty much every job.
You really
in
have.
this world.
Yeah.
And so I used to work for a company called Paramount Linen
Okay.
and Supplies. So we'd bring the lockers, a lot of the towels and the smocks and that type of stuff.
Yeah, the
because they
wraps
got
and
real
things,
dirty.
yeah.
So of course, this wasn't one like. This was an old school one, not where they get, like they zing the cow and then it just drops, or anything like that. But this thing was, in the pen, and then they bring it up and they string it up so it's hanging there and then
Like alive.
alive, and then they do their thing. And so I'm like, wow, the smell. You
Yeah.
mentioned the smell. The smell's horrible.
Yeah.
But I go out, I bring their dirties out to the truck, bring in their clean. This took maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
As I'm coming in, there's a trash can sitting there. Well, there's the cow's head sitting on the trash can.
Oh.
I'm like, wow, that was quick.
Hey, I'm glad for the cow.
Yes, I've seen it. Yep. And
Tina
it's-
Tina says they also had sausage pizza that day for lunch. No one ate.
I like to not think about how my food gets to me.
So Tina's grandma, again, we're talking rural Indiana. She would go like slaughter chickens, and then they would eat the chickens. Sweetest, kindest lady you'd ever meet. And I've often wondered this. I'm curious you guys' take on this. If you had to like slaughter your own meat, do you think you would eat a lot less meat, or do you think you would just get kind of conditioned and hardened to it, and like it just wouldn't be a big deal?
Probably conditioned to it.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah?
And
Okay.
it seems like that's, I don't want to say in our like evolutionary nature or something, but it's like,
But it
that's
is
how
to
we survived to
yeah.
eat this. And
Yeah.
that's what you did. You hunted and
Yeah.
you ate.
Yeah, I think, that would be natural, right? As far as like right now, it's so easy to just go buy some meat.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're having to fend for yourself and grow your own food and kill your own food and butcher your own food, that takes a lot more work, and so therefore, like you're burning calories.
Yeah.
You're looking forward to the next meal, so it doesn't matter that you're gonna have to go through this process. You just want to go through the process so you can eat again, right?
Yeah. All right. So here's the ethical question to you guys, and this is like actually legit. This isn't theoretical. So we've got Pekin ducks, and we kind of got them as like rescues, and then they're pets to us. Now Pekins are like, think Donald Duck. They're like the big white ducks. They don't really fly. They're bred to actually be meat eaters, but for us, they're pets. So it's like, well, I don't know, maybe 5-6 weeks ago or something like that. I'm coming home from church and I pull in, and there's this huge stinking hawk sitting on the apron of our garage, and I'm like, what's he doing up there, right? And again, our ducks are free range, so gotta get a little closer, and there's just like an explosion of feathers everywhere, and we see like he's on top of our one duck. His name is Alexander, and and the duck is gone, right? He killed the duck, hopefully quick, and he's sitting there starting to pick her apart. Okay, so we chase him out, and my daughter comes out, and there's like all the emotional moments and stuff like that. But then we're sitting there looking at the duck, and her neck was basically torn apart, but the body was like intact. And we're sitting here going, kind of like legitimately,
seems like a waste.
It seems like a waste, She's already died. We chased the hawk off,
At that point, why though?
Because you react in the moment. You come home and someone's picking apart your pet.
Yeah.
You just kind of go into fight or flight, right?
Little did we know the hawk was Steve's pet.
And
Right.
truth be told, I mean,
Go get him, fella.
you don't even know what's going on at
Looking for
first. You just see it
ducks
on top of her. You don't even know if she's alive or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
So, we chased her off, but we're sitting here going, do we just bury her because she's like a pet and kind of like honor her that way? But at the same time, it's like, what a waste. Like,
Or
do
do
we
we
eat her? So
smoke
what
her?
would you have done? Would you have?
If it was me, now I say this as not having an emotional tie to the
So make it
duck.
your cat.
So
Would you eat your cat?
no, I would not eat my cat.
It's orange chicken at that point.
Yeah, right.
The duck, I would say, and this is easier for me to say.
Yeah.
Right? I would have probably said, well, everything has a life, and this life was taken, and it was, you're feeding the wild.
Right.
That crow
Right.
or
Yeah.
hawk
Or coyotes or
has to go hunt
lots of
for his food.
Yeah, totally.
And has to sleep outside during a cold winter. You can just go inside and then get in the fridge, right?
Yeah,
Having
exactly.
pity on the hawk.
I am. Because it's like
Tables have turned.
this is a wild animal that's having to fend for himself. And it's surprising to me that hawk has made it this far in life.
Yeah.
Right? So I would have probably taken the duck somewhere else, let whoever is going to eat.
Right. And that was kind of like one of the things. Do we carry him out to the field? Just leave him there? Like,
You
eye
guys
shot,
don't need to eat the duck, right?
No, we
Because
don't
you
need to
have
eat the
food.
duck. Yeah.
Plus, to me, I don't know. I don't know if I would eat it because I'm like, well, he was a good fella. Having guilt, remorse with every bite.
I don't even like duck that much anyway.
I don't like
I've
that
had it a
either.
few
It's
times.
too
I'm like,
gamey.
it's not good.
It's
I like
greasy,
that.
dark meat.
I like that, but bird flu. I would have been like, nope, go ahead. Cheers now.
But it's crazy because you think of being
Yeah.
from like a mill as being cleaner than like free range,
Right.
Which
Isn't necessarily the truth.
no, probably the opposite, right?
I had a weird thing yesterday. I got home from work, and I was like, "There's something on my porch." Like, I don't know. It was kind of getting dark out, and I go get my mail and look on the porch, and it's just 2 rabbits' feet
Just the feet.
and
Cat
the
did that probably. Yeah.
tendons, leftover bones, like
Yeah,
connecting
kind of
them
like
together.
right. Something got a meal there.
And I was
huh?
like, "Why is this on my porch?"
Your neighbors aren't Italian, are they?
Is that
I
like an
don't think
Italian
so.
I don't know.
delicacy,
They
or
put
you just
horse
like
heads in beds,
Yeah,
things
horse
like
heads in
that.
beds.
But
All
like
right,
the
all right.
pit still
No, they
had
want
all-
you to move.
like all the fur and everything on them, just like gnawed
Yeah.
off. But the creepiest part was the
foot
like
was
tendons
intact.
and bones
Yeah.
that was attaching the 2 things together.
So did you like make it into a keychain or
No,
no?
I got my snow shovel out and put it into a trash bag and put it in the trash.
Actually, in his
I was
pocket,
like, I don't know what to do.
And
with
I can
this.
see you, man. You're like wrapping yourself in plastic and got gloves on.
I did put
and-
gloves on. I was like, there's no way. But I just want to know what the mailman thought when he delivered my mail. If this was just sitting, because one of the feet was like hanging off the porch. The other one, it was.
Yeah.
Maybe
I'm like,
it
I
was
never
the
want to see that again. But yeah, you do see like growing up in the 90s, kids had like
Yeah.
rabbit foot keychains.
Remember that?
yeah,
Yeah, and
I
you get them like
totally
the
had
carnivals
one.
and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
So
this
that's
was
the thing.
much larger and a lot more blood than those ever had on them. So.
Well, and it probably wasn't purple.
Yeah,
That's what I
it
was
not
thinking of
dyed
too.
purple.
I
Purple,
must have
right?
had one, yeah.
Purple rabbits.
This
Was.
was very,
Yeah.
very brown rabbit
Yeah.
color.
Well, because they didn't want to scare kids. Like, oh, what? This is what I'm holding. Like some animal had to die for me to carry this around as a keychain.
But if it's purple,
But it's
that's
purple.
made up.
well,
Well,
that's
and were those
It's not
real?
real.
oh, I'm sure they were real.
Oh yeah.
The bunny factory.
See, but I think if you so Aaron says that I grew up butchering beef. Better to know where it came from,
Yeah.
right? And I think you'd probably have less waste if you were doing it yourself,
Yeah.
Totally.
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
You're
I mean,
like,
even
"Oh,
just from the selfish reason of, man alive, this is a lot of work,
Right.
you know? And
yep, we can make something. We can make a stew out of that
Yeah.
jaw or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was before I moved to Nebraska. I'd never thought of where any of the food, like corn, anything like that, came from. And then it's like, oh, I moved there. I'm like, oh,
that's
I
where
guess,
it comes
because
from.
I knew people that did.
What is that?
Detasseling.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which I was like,
Yeah.
I have no clue.
Yeah, it
what
was
that
one
is.
of
I'm
our
like,
first jobs.
people have
should
to
go do
go
that.
through the fields and
You
do
should
this.
you should go do that for a summer, Andrew.
No, thank you.
Oh,
Okay,
my
legit.
God.
Like, and to anyone who's like living in those kind of like regions,
Yeah.
do they still do that,
Yeah.
or have they like bred the corn in such a way
yeah,
that you don't
they
need to
still
do
do
that
it.
anymore? They do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you never hear like we live on the edge of
They
farmland
got
here, and I
things
never
now.
hear people that is like, okay,
Yeah.
they go through on machines now. It's not like,
Yeah, you sit,
school
you like
kids
sit
getting-
out on an arm and you're just doing this as the tractor rolls.
oh, okay,
Eliminates the height factor.
Yeah,
okay.
but I had friends in college who did that every summer.
Yeah.
Oh man.
No,
you
I
make
just
good-
didn't know
you
if they
used to
like
make
kind of
good
like
money
did
at
hybrid
that.
seed today
Yeah.
that you didn't need to do it anymore or something because
Good
they got like
money,
all
but
this.
It could be, yeah.
Horrible work. And you're walking through your faces getting spider webs.
Oh.
Yeah,
just
right.
all
It's hot
over.
and getting
You're-
cut up,
You're
and
hot,
yeah,
you're sweaty,
had to
you're
wear
cold in the morning.
Long
Getting a
sleeves and
rash,
pants,
yeah.
'cause
Yeah.
otherwise you get cut
Yeah.
up by it.
right,
Bugs.
Rashes,
right.
Bugs,
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
But it paid well.
Did
Yeah,
it?
it did.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
a,
it
for
paid
a,
better than
for a
the.
kid
Yeah, for
Yeah.
a kid,
to
absolutely.
work that long.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve. Hey, Steve, how are you? My sister did that a couple of summers.
Yeah.
Nice. I see.
Yeah.
Steve's
Okay.
from Japan.
She's in Japan right now.
Is it really?
Yeah.
All right,
Steve,
All
what
right.
time is it?
Kyoto.
Steve, let us know what time it is in Japan.
Surprised that you're.
It's time to let everybody know you're listening to 21.6 The Net right here. This is questions you never thought you could ask in church. We're here live every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Central. You can find us on Fellowship of Faith Facebook. You can find 21.6 Facebook. You can find 21.6 YouTube, Fellowship of Faith YouTube. Now you can go out to the Twitch universe, everybody. We are on Twitch.
We're in the
Go
Twitch
to-
universe. All right.
Go to
all right.
216 The Net, and you can catch questions you never thought you could ask church out on Twitch. We're on Twitter at studios_216. You can go to fellowshipoffaith.org and get the FOF Plus page. And you can find all the past episodes there, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. On Sundays, we go live here on 21.6 The Net at 9:55 for pregame, then the worship hour, and now the new live.fellowshipoffaith.org to where you can celebrate with us in live time, which is also awesome. A lot of good stuff. Also, if you have a question, text it to 815-314-0363, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Doesn't matter what part of the world you're from. 4 a.m. in Kyoto, Tokyo, Japan area, right? So even at 4 a.m., you can text or listen.
All right. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks, Ken.
absolutely. Um,
Kelly says, "Oh my! I thought the name of the show was Slaughterhouse 3."
It has been rather.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
just
there's
wait till the
actually
second
more,
half,
there's
Kelly.
more questions about sacrifices and offerings.
Okay, I think we got to
So-
push. No, let's push it.
Do you
We're,
wanna-
we're theming the show. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
hit it. Right.
Okay,
right?
let's do
It's
it.
going to make my write up so much easier. You know. For the...
Slaughterhouse 3.
Just blood and more blood. That's it.
Oh,
Um,
cheer you.
Why does God call to kill his creation as a blood sacrifice to him in the Old Testament? We've seen this since Genesis, but it's never really explained why. Reading Leviticus and the beginning is all the different types of sacrifices, mostly
Yeah.
animal. So
Yeah, you're right. So you do see this throughout the Bible before Leviticus and before like even the Hebrew people are called together at Mount Sinai to become this new people of God. It's kind of being in the bones of culture and society of all different stripes and varieties since arguably the beginning. I suppose. I mean, a lot of people, if you just take the biblical story, will even point to like Genesis chapter 3, where you see Adam and Eve fall into sin, and God gives like them skins to cover themselves, is almost like prefiguring the first idea of sacrifice. And there is actually an answer given to this, like laid out, like what the significance of this is. And you can read about it in Leviticus 17. And it's this little line, and it just says this: the life force is in the blood. The Hebrew people, or the Jewish people, were not allowed to eat the blood in the animal. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But Leviticus stipulates it by saying the life force is in the blood. The idea that it's through your blood that you are brought to life, animated in life, kept alive. Obviously, there's kind of like a observational factor to this. Like someone dies, like someone gets hit and spills a lot of blood, they die, right? You lose blood, you get weak. So that's the mentality behind it. And the reason that you then sacrifice an animal is because something has to die. The wages of sin is death, as the New Testament will put it. Something has to die on behalf of sin. We owe God a blood debt. And God set up a provision because God does not want us to die. He does not want to kill us. He doesn't want death, period. It was never part of his plan that an animal could be given as a substitute for your own sin. That life for a life, if you can put it that way. But you got to kind of then push this to its logical conclusion to how this gets reconfigured with Christ. Because I think it's arguable to say that an animal life is not as valuable as a human life, right? So at some level, as the writer of the Hebrews will put it, all the blood of bulls and goats will never really be enough to substitute for the sin of humanity. But if a human was to die, right, it's on an equal playing field, but then it would still be life for life, right? I mean, how does, like, if I die, how does my life count for like 5 others? At best, you could do the math and go, it's kind of 1 for 1. Wouldn't you agree? Mm-hmm. Logically. So what if God was to become a man? And what if God was to die? Because I would argue this as well, that not all the human lives in the world equal up in value to God. But if God is to die, if God is then to take on human life to become a representative and a substitute for humanity, and thereby that's why Jesus' death on the cross has this atoning power, if you will, for all of humanity, because God gave his life on our behalf. Yeah, so and that's what's behind it.
I have 2 different questions about that. The first one, I think this is in the Bible, but again,
it's like the beard thing, right?
Bible knowledge.
Hey, but you pulled out some Isaiah 50.
Right?
You brought it to the
there
mat.
somewhere.
Yeah, we got plucking beards. All right.
Did other gods?
It's next to the exfoliation passage.
There's a really good skincare routine.
Right.
Creams. What kind of creams can you use?
Did other gods require sacrifices as well throughout the Bible? So is that which came first? The God of the Bible wanting or requiring sacrifices, or other gods, Greek gods, Roman gods requiring sacrifices? Like, it seems like what made these sacrifices to this God work and okay, and these ones were pagan practices and not.
You're going to get different answers to that question depending on what source you're reading. And when I say what source you're reading, I'm not talking about like what book of the Bible you're reading, but I'm stating it this way because as I give what I believe is the true answer to this, there's going to be a whole bunch of like secular anthropologists and historians and people like that and go, wait a minute, because they interpret history differently.
Yeah.
From the biblical point of view, what you see very early on, besides that one passage that I mentioned with God providing skins, is the first 2 offspring of humanity being Cain and Abel. This is Adam and Eve's children, according to the Genesis story, coming to bring offerings to God. And Cain brings like produce, fruit of the land, to God. And Abel brings animal life to God. So you see from the biblical perspective in Genesis that from the very beginning, you do have the idea of animals or life being offered to God. And then if you follow the Genesis trajectory, you see that, of course, humanity continues to propagate and develop and move and spread out. And with it, people start losing knowledge of the Lord and insight of God and even an understanding of why they do what they do. But innate within each human being is there's sense of there's something greater, there's something more, and there's powers that are beyond us. And a sense of God, I think, resides in the heart of every human being, even those who reject the idea of God. And that leads to all kinds of distortions of belief and practices. People would make up ideas of who God is and myths about him and how to treat him or how many gods there are. And so you see very early on in all of human history, the idea of sacrifice is kind of being a foundational way that people have always interacted with God or the gods of their own.
So you try to like appease the gods. Like, oh, if I do this, it'll please the gods.
You got it.
Whatever. Like,
you got it. Yeah. Maybe I'm bribing them. Maybe I'm showing them how much I love them. Maybe I'm buying them off. And a lot of people who study the Old Testament will say that what God is doing in Leviticus is not like rejecting all human cultural practice, but taking that as a starting place of assumption of where like the people were at, but then channeling it and interpreting it in different ways for different purposes. So almost kind of like hijacking it and reinterpreting something good out of it rather than something bad, or using it and limiting it in certain ways, like obviously, child sacrifice, which was common, and, things like that.
Kind of interesting, though, as far as like you go back in time and everybody, whether there was the right God or wrong God, irrelevant, they believed in something. So when did atheism come into play?
There is, again, this really, like, I think often overlooked, somewhat obscure, but I think kind of pivotal passage that comes right at the end of the Cain and Abel story. You could read this. I think off the top of my head, I want to say it's Genesis 4, maybe like verse 25 or 35. It's like the last little package of it. And let me just pull it up right now, and I'll read it word for word. Here's the line. It's like the back half of 26, and it's almost like a throwaway line. At that time, at what time? After kind of like the family tree of Adam and Eve, like built out a little bit, like several generations got built out. It goes, at that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. And it's often marked as like a first moment where people who didn't know God started to call on God again. Now, I can't say that's the same as atheism, because there's a difference between saying there is no God or not knowing or believing in a certain God or one true God. But I mean, you do see elements of atheism, certainly in like classical Greek, philosophy and things like that. I'd be fascinated to go back and go like, what is the first recorded instance? I got to believe it's been there at some capacity from the very beginning.
It'd be kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Google,
right? To go against everything that everyone has ever said as far as believing in something greater than yourself, right?
Yeah.
So Google has it that the term atheism originated in the 16th century. France, ideas that would be recognized today as atheistic existed before the advent of classical antiquity. Eastern philosophy has a long history of non-theistic belief.
Sure.
Yeah, starting with Laozi and Siddhartha in the 6th century BC.
You could look at Hinduism too, and if we have any like practicing Hindus who are listening to the show or people versed in it, please chime in. But there's two ways you can kind of approach Hinduism. One is to see like there being like millions and millions upon millions of gods, and the other is to see everything just being like one giant whole. And then if you view it as one giant whole and all these like gods as a manifestation or just kind of like a reflection or interpretation of the one whole, well, if everything is God, is everything actually God, or is there no God? And you can interpret that. Did that make sense? Kind of coming out of my mouth? Yeah. All right. Because as I was saying it, I felt like
chicken or the egg.
Yeah, I've heard people say that there's no such thing as a true atheist. Like, it's not possible to not think that there's a God. I don't know, too many negatives in there. But yeah, there's no such thing as an actual true atheist, because you believe in something. You
so
just
it comes
don't
down
want to put a name to
like what is God? How do you define God?
Yeah. So it's really, agnosticism.
Well, agnosticism is kind of just the self-admittance going, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just fundamentally don't know. And some will say you can't know, and some are like, oh, I just don't know.
Mhm.
So that is different, but
Yeah.
yeah.
If you're on the fence about this, Frank Turek's got a great book called "It Takes Too Much Faith to Be an Atheist."
I think,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that might have been
It's a
where I
great
heard
book.
From. Yeah.
I have a copy if anybody wants to borrow it.
yeah.
Kent.
Could you just read it and record it for me?
Absolutely. Yes.
How do you spell like Turek?
Turek, Turek.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good rec. Thanks.
Yeah, check it out. He's on Facebook as well. I'm sure he's on everything.
Sure.
But it's called
Everyone's on everything.
Cross-Examined.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Okay.
So the other question I had that ties in with the sacrifices and kind of where did that come from and start is, I don't think there's an answer for this, but why is it necessary? Why did God make it necessary at all for there to be a sacrifice for anything? Like it's a system that I think we go, oh, that is just what was required, but God put that system into place.
Right.
So
right.
ultimately he required this. Oh, well, something needs to sacrifice or die in order for this to be okay. But that isn't necessarily a like law of nature that needed to happen. Like, and even that, God made that too. So I think
So
it's weird.
here's
in
my take
mind
on
to
it.
Figure that out.
Yeah.
Here's my take on it, and I'm probably wrong, but that's where I would go. Is that it's a trust, right? Just like the tithe, there's a trust where it's like everything that you have, I've given to you. So therefore, you're going to sacrifice something that means something to you, and that's going to actually hurt a little bit for you to give this to me. So I just think it's his way of saying that. Look, again, you would have nothing without me. So therefore, it's a sacrifice. It's a literal sacrifice. What else would he do? Like, what would be some other options?
Yeah. If you
I
want
would say, does there need to be an option?
Sure. And then I would say, why doesn't there need to be option?
I don't have a good answer for that, but it's always seemed interesting to me that that's just like an assumption that, oh, well, this is what had to happen. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, is it though?
And then you ask that same question as to why would he have to sacrifice his own son?
Mhm.
I mean, that the ultimate sacrifice, right?
Yeah, and how would that be like
Which he didn't
be the
have.
magic solution
Mhm.
to like, okay, we had millions of animals sacrificed. Nah, that wasn't good enough. Now this thing is like it I don't know. That's where my brain goes.
Yeah, I mean, at some level, I think like why did God make the universe the way He did? Why did He put the laws
It's
of
one
the
of those, like,
universe the way He put it?
unanswerable
It's almost unanswerable.
Mhm.
But I mean, to Steve's point, and I love that, man. I think that's like spot on. Is people just kind of look at the reality of life and they're begging and pleading before the powers that be. They either want to show gratitude, they want to show the depth of love, or they want to really show how much they mean it. Right. And so I think it was always a natural human response to offer something as a way of going, look how far I will go to try to win your favor. I mean, think about when you're trying to convince someone to do something, right? Why do you have to try to convince people to do things? Why is the world that way? I guess I don't know, but
Yeah.
you've observed that you have
is.
to. It is.
Mhm.
So what do? You try to show how much you mean it, how trustworthy you are, how much you're willing to give, how much that person can bank on you, or a thousand other things, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what a sacrifice is doing, at least at one level.
Mhm.
Hey, we have
Yeah.
a pretty cool question here. Are the 10 Commandments ranked in importance?
I actually think so.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure that they're ranked in importance 1 to 10,
Mhm.
like that 8 is more important than 9. But I do think that the first commandment is there as the header
Reason.
and an umbrella of all the other commandments is what defines it. And I think that the way that you respond to God first, which leads the 10 commandments, sets the stage for how you then respond to other people. So I do think that there is some sense of ordering going on in that.
Let me follow up to that real quick, because there's been a lot of, well, probably within the last couple of years, I know one pastor that came out and he said 10 commandments are irrelevant now. After Jesus, it doesn't matter at this point.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's hard because it's going to sound like people are like Christians, especially.
It depends on what
Are-
word you use
are-
and what you mean by that
It
word.
does. What are you packaging in that word? Because at one level, and I've said it on this show, we are not bound by the 10 commandments, right? But on the other hand, I can say something that sounds the exact opposite. We're completely bound by the 10 Commandments. So what the heck do you mean? Well, the 10 Commandments were part of the Old Testament covenant law given to the people of Israel. And when it comes to the actual prescriptions of what they say, we are not under that system of law any more than I'm under the system of law that exists in China or that existed in Greece in 400 BC, right? But there are principles in that are timeless. I mean, at some level, I don't think God wants people murdering people anywhere, no matter what culture, and that's a timeless principle. But something like the Sabbath, well, maybe I don't have to respect a certain day is what I'm bound to in a certain way, but there is still a principle in the Sabbath day commandment of trusting God that he will provide for you, remembering that he has freed you from slavery, and knowing that he is the one taking care of the universe, so I can put my life in his hands and not operate my life only by what I have to produce.
Yeah, and I think what often goes along with that, or with people who claim that, or pastors who claim that, is like, oh, well, Jesus just said, love God and love your neighbor, love others. But none of the 10 Commandments are different from those two.
They're all expressions of that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, even if you say, oh, but now we just have to follow this, it's like, okay, but if you break any of the 10 Commandments, you're breaking one of those core ones as
Exactly.
well. So while you're not bound by that, it seems like implied within the new command, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, either way, you're going to fail at both of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
right.
I think it's time to go for it now.
You got it.
And this actually does
All right.
relate
All right.
to Leviticus too.
Oh, okay.
So kind of the
Okay.
I would say the first question that came in that's about
we're going
this.
to go for it.
I know, right? We got 8 minutes left.
Is there any priming that needs to happen before this?
Well, Andrew, I'm going to tell you right now that's 7 minutes more than what I need. All right.
This is way too much time.
Oh my gosh.
It needs to be the last 30 seconds.
As the music is playing, let's just
Okay. You'll understand everything in just about 30 seconds.
We're going to be so disappointed if this question
Yeah,
is
I
not
know,
going
I
down the
know.
road that we think it's going down right now.
how does it work in Jewish law and the Christian beliefs? Again, talking about Leviticus. So Leviticus has a list of behaviors. Is it those things that are listed are allowed and everything else not listed is forbidden? Or is it only those things forbidden can't be done, but all things not listed can be done? So kind of if it's listed as this is okay, does that mean everything else is not okay?
Yeah.
Or if it's listed as this is not okay, does that mean everything else is okay? And then the last thing is think sex toys.
Yeah.
Those aren't listed specifically.
Right. So you can read Leviticus. Is it chapter 18? Maybe it's Leviticus 19. It's right around there. Or maybe it's 17. I don't know. But it gives like a whole list of like sexual ethics, and it lists some things very specifically. It's like, you don't want to be like divorcing your wife and then marrying someone else's wife or sleeping with someone else's wife. And it's often talked from the male perspective. So it talks about adultery. It talks about like how a man shouldn't lay with a man the way he would lay with a woman. It talks about homosexuality. It talks about not having sex with animals. I mean, and some of it gets pretty like off the deep, level of like, really? That has to be in there? But yeah, you're not going to find like sex toys listed in there, right? And so it does kind of beg the question. It's like, how did ancient Judaism interpret this law? And the problem is you can't do it either way because it has both lists of like prohibitions, but also commands to do certain things. Yeah. So you can't just say, well, it just tells me what I can't do and I can do everything else, or vice versa, because it doesn't operate that way with itself. It was always meant to be case law. That's the easiest way of putting it. And so the idea behind it is what you're getting is not devotional material that every Israelite was supposed to kind of like read. That kind of happened a little bit later. It was really meant originally for people like Moses and the people he appointed and the judges and the priests to kind of navigate society together. So it's what the judges would learn as principles to help them navigate other principles that might not be actually stipulated. So it was never intended to give every single stipulation or every single law of that which is right or wrong and define it. And it would be wrong to approach it in such a way to say, well, it didn't say I can't do it, so I guess it's okay, or vice versa.
Yeah.
What it was trying to give is principles. And by learning those principles, you then apply it to all kinds of situations that you can come up with that life and technology and society together are going to kind of find themselves in the midst of. And you draw on those to make sense of it. Let me give a great example. We had a call-in on the show once, Christian girl I know, living up in like the Portland area, which is a very like secular and even anti-Christian culture in many ways, who is friends with a lot of people, and none of them are Christians, and they kind of ridicule Christianity, and she struggles with that. And she texted in something about, like, I think it was Deuteronomy 25, where it talks about how, like, if a woman, like if two guys get into a fight and the woman intervenes and like grabs the guy by the balls and mutilates his testicles, she's supposed to have her hand chopped off. Mm-hmm. Well, people sometimes read that and go, this is like the most crazy, backward, barbaric thing that I've ever seen. And they're saying it because they don't understand what they're reading and what the law is meant to do. The law is not literally, there's no record in the Bible or anyone else of some woman in Christian circles or Judaic circles of getting their hand lopped off in this kind of specific situation. What it's doing is applying eye for an eye in a commonsensical kind of way that might come up, so that you go, as it comes up in 1,000 other ways, this is how I can apply it too. If you mutilate someone's testicles and you're a woman, well, hey, got off, on that one, because I don't got them, right? How does an eye for an eye work in a very just way? Well, you find something of direct value, of direct impact, like what was partisan to the act. And truth be told, they didn't, there was capital punishment, but they didn't go around ripping people's eyes out back then or ripping their teeth out. You would value things at the value of an eye or a tooth and give compensation. And so for the woman in this aspect, it would be something very similar. You have destroyed something by this act. So how do you compensate for what you have done? And that's the principle. You don't get to kill her. You don't get to cut off the whole arm, right? Because that would be going beyond the crime. Justice, right?
If you will. Yeah.
So you think of the crime as being equated to the hand, and then how do you compensate at that level? And suddenly it becomes a very sophisticated system of law instead of the backward, barbaric way that people often approach it.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's all about getting the principles out of it and applying those principles rather than like looking for the loopholes in what I can and cannot do. Yeah. Here's a way that God wants you to live and think about right and wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. So this last one kind of ties into that as well. I think it'll be a similar answer. I'm a Christian husband with a Christian wife. Okay. Books I have read on intimacy and marriage say as few as 1 in 5 wives get an orgasm from intercourse. My wife does not get one. She has asked me to get her a vibrator. This would help her get an orgasm when we copulate. One concern is she might prefer to use it when she is alone. What should I do?
Yeah, and I want to say right off the bat, I mean, questions like this are what this show is about. I want to thank you for asking, because I mean, it can be an embarrassing question to ask. I mean, you're certainly making yourself vulnerable by asking it, and we appreciate it because you're not alone struggling with this. Yeah. I've known a lot of Christian couples too who they try to do it God's way, and by doing it God's way, like, we're going to wait to have sex until we get married. And they think that by doing so, when they start having sex, they're going to have like this incredible sex life. It's just going to explode. And, sometimes that happens. But a lot of times they find, no, we got to kind of like figure each other out and learn each other. And we don't always respond to each other, and certainly not at the same time in the same way. And so I want to encourage you on that. And there's a lot of, like, as you said, maybe counselors or books or things that people can help you through on that. But look, I think there's a basic principle here. That what you want to be doing in the act of sex is honoring your wife and loving your wife and giving to her as much as she wants to be giving in reciprocity to you. So as long as you're going in, I think it's fair to say the Christian principle of sex, when it gets down to these particulars, in this kind of relationship, so to speak, is what you're doing bringing pleasure and goodness and wholeness to your spouse, or is it degrading her? That might help navigate some of these sex toy conversations or other kind of whatever role playing or whatever you kind of get into type of things. Is this something that honors her or degrades her? Is this something that lifts her up or tears her down? Is this something that brings her joy or humiliates her? Is this something that brings her pleasure or hurts her? And that's kind of got to be the guiding focus here. And then finally, because the fear is she might prefer to do it alone, well, yeah, that could be a risk and that could be a fear, but I think the sexual relationship was always meant to be two and not one. And so then the onus is going to be on her to go, wait a minute, am I just seeking pleasure or am I seeking my husband? And how do I seek my husband as the source of pleasure? And how do we figure it out together? And maybe you got to talk about it. Maybe you got to get conversational about it. I know that can be embarrassing and you got to be sensitive to that too. But the joy of it is you and your wife get to figure this out, and you and your wife get to figure out something that's kind of fun to figure out. Right. And I think that honors God to figure that out together and just seek him on the principle aspect. And, if you need some outside help, then that's cool. Do that. Don't be embarrassed about that. Seek that, but seek it together within a way that honors each other, and you'll be okay.
One more thing with that, I would imagine that if you are able to text in or email in this show about that content, then I could be completely wrong here, but it tells me that you're not shying away from the, let's quote unquote, the challenge. And so therefore I would imagine also that if you've gone this far in conversation with your wife, then there's probably an openness there, right? So to explore. And so I would encourage just like exploring, then asking her what she wants, what parts, you know, like every woman is different, but there's some obvious, like, well, that's where you go, you know? So like ask her, like, does this feel good? I mean, to be blunt, like, does this feel good? Does this feel good?
You get to share intimacy at a conversational level as well.
And don't shy away from that. It's a gift from God, you know? And it's like, be thankful about that and be thankful that you do get to share that with her, you know? So it's awesome stuff.
Well, Kent is over here giving us like the land the plane sign, and not because
Actually,
of the topic,
no, he
but
wasn't.
because of the time.
He's over here taking notes.
And
I'll replay this.
And now his head is as red as that microphone.
I love it. Well, we've come to the end of the hour, and as my wife has maybe probably thought at times, it's over already. Yes, it is. We have come to the end of the show for today. But honestly, thanks for asking these questions, especially some of the ones that are maybe deep or personal, like we got to at the end. And that's, again, what this show is about. You can text your questions at any time to 815-314-0363. If we didn't get to it today, it is in our inbox. We will get to it as soon as we can. We go live every Wednesday afternoon, 12:30 p.m. Central Time. Hope to catch you next time. God bless. And hey, have a great week.